The immune system is an interesting system of the human body because it's comprised of what some people think are almost complete other systems, like your lymphatic system, but also different organs and bones and blood cells, and a lot that we don't know. And all my studies of immunology, I just got more and more confused. So I took it upon myself one year to go in the medical school and medical library and not come out until I understood the immune system. What a joke. And I realized a number of things about the immune system and anatomy and physiology in general. It is not so finite. It is not, we cannot look into the human body and have any idea of what everything is and what everything does. Every year we know more, but generally that just disproves what we thought we knew last year. Does that make sense? So medicine and science and technology is always wrong because in 2 years it'll contradict or go against what we thought or add to it to such a degree it makes what we know redundant. So the point is do not get too attached to anatomy. Don't get attached at all to physiology. These are just some thoughts of what might go on. And I'm going to present it in a much more holistic way than you would hear it anywhere else. In the libraries and in medical school, what I first saw was that most professors did not necessarily agree on their interpretation of the immune system because so much more is being discovered about it every day. This made it even more confusing and more complex. That's why we didn't use any immune charts in your workbook. We used one I drew, because I didn't like any of them. Most people in medical school just tried to get through immunology and memorize what was on the text so they could pass it and move on. Very few people take that on as a field, although it's one of the most lucrative fields because we're talking about the cure for cancer. We're talking about the cure for AIDS. At least medicine and science still lies to us into thinking that we're going to come up with a pill cure for these. And the reason they go down this road, even though 90% of the professors I talk to in the field of immunology, most of the professors that I talk to, they don't believe it. They know that the only way we're going to survive the onslaught of antigens and pathogens, the only way we're going to survive it is by our own body building up a defense, not with inoculations and vaccinations. Let's read my description. It says, your immune system is a unique system of your body, meaning it is comprised of many different types of organs, tissues, cells, and fluids. These parts are located all over your body. The major components are the cells, a lymphatic system including vessels, ducts, nodes, bone marrow, lymphoid aggregations like the tonsils, the appendix, the Peyer's patches, the thymus, the spleen, and there's other parts. The system has one main objective: to protect you from harmful alien invaders or self-mutating parts that have gone haywire in your body. I may be paraphrasing this slightly, but it is something I wrote. These harmful organisms or aliens include bacteria, viruses, fungus, pollen, cancer cells, dead or old blood cells, almost any substance that's not you anymore. If it's not you anymore, a part of your body that's worn out, or it is an alien coming into your body, your immune system kills it immediately, or attempts to kill it immediately, may even set up a complex defense mechanism to kill it over a period of days. If it's not you, it's dead. The action it takes to destroy and neutralize and eliminating any invading microorganisms is fascinating, complex, and to be honest, we're far from knowing it all, and that's for sure. There are many immune cells. There are the macrophages, which are the big eaters. They're your largest immune cell. They eat anything in sight that's not you. They are the garbage collectors. There are many types of T cells, and new ones being discovered occasionally. T helper cells detect invaders and communicate enemy identification and strength, while T killer cells kill on sight, and suppressor cells suppress the immune system's ability when the war should be slowed down or made over. And your B cells have various types of surface immunoglobulins on them that they will use to create antibodies, which are specific poisons for specific invaders. Now we're going to spend a few hours going over all of that. The components of the immune system. I was pretty lucky to wrestle these away from my son, I'll tell you. Magic markers are pretty... May I ask, is the board turned this way for the cameras, or can I straighten it out just for me? Okay. Tim says straighten it out. That isn't right. Engineers, just scream. The bone marrow, by many to be considered the major component of the immune system. Inside the major bones of your body, there is marrow. Not necessarily in the little bones, but in the big bones. In your sternum, femur, big, large bones of your body, there is marrow. And it's often referred to as two types of marrow. Okay, start that over. Red, or active, and yellow, or fatty, or inactive. And science has been for years telling us that we have red active bone marrow that works to build our blood cells, all our blood cells. And as we get older, it turns into yellow inactive bone marrow or fatty bone marrow, and it doesn't do anything. And then after that, we get old and die. It has always been said that once it turns yellow, it can never turn back red again, or once it is inactive, it can never be activated again. And up until about 10, 15 years ago, that was the law of science. The law of science. We always see that. Brain cells cannot regenerate. And then they do. Well, now medicine has eaten its books and words and says, yes, in certain individuals, that fatty, degenerative, inactive bone marrow turns red again, and becomes active, and your immune system kicks in. Now, what do you think might make that happen? Everything we are talking about. This is the basis of natural healing. You follow the programs and create a healthy lifestyle. And I don't care who says what's impossible, I tell you it is possible. And my patients proved it. Heck, I proved it myself with my own body. You haven't even heard all my favorite stories that you hear on the tapes or at the beginning crusade. I could talk hours about my hand and my knee and all the things that doctors said would never work again or never be in me. And I could spend years going over my patients. But I just like to bring up these examples of every time science says it can't happen, it can't be done, let me tell you, they will eventually say, yes, it does. Maybe these people who couldn't get their immune system back working just didn't say, I love myself, and kiss their hand like I do with Arthur and Anisha every day in our jacuzzi. It's one of our routines. Maybe like Dr. Jensen used to go out and walk out the window every morning and go, I love life. All I know is when you put our programs together, we break all the rules of constipated, crystallized, godless, unconscious medicine and science. Was that clear enough? Another major component of the immune system is the lymphatic. system, which is comprised of vessels, nodules, and nodes. And this is a system of fluid that circulates around your body. And in that fluid are many things we're going to talk about. And as it circulates, it goes to different organs and areas, but it collects in lymph nodules and lymph nodes. And some of you know you've felt them before when they have been swollen under your arms or in your groin, or maybe in your sternum you'll feel lymph bumps, or in the creases of your groin lymph bumps, or lymph bumps in your neck, or in your armpits. And that's when lymphatic fluid is swelling and gathering there. And these are a filtering system of the lymph that can move lymph in and out of the lymphatic system. Along with the lymphatic system are what are called lymphoid aggregations. And the major lymphoid aggregations would be the tonsils, the Peyer's patches, and the appendix. And I'm going to go over all these individually later, but let's just look at all the parts here. You have three sets of tonsils. Two sets of tonsils and one called adenoids. And they're located in your upper, middle, and lower back of your mouth. The Peyer's patches are located in the small intestines, and there are other immune areas all along the small intestines on the wall of the mucous membrane. And the appendix is located at the bottom of the cecum. Your tonsils and adenoids' job is to check anything that is going to go inside you through the mouth. Whether it's draining from your sinuses or you breathed it in through your nose, or whether it's something you're chewing and you're going to swallow. Their job is to see anything that's going to enter your digestive, assimilation, and elimination tract, whether it's air, liquid, or solid. Detecting anything that's bad. You have an organ called the thymus, which is thought to be the site where T cells are all educated in your body. These are immune cells, and that's why they're called T cells, just for the thymus. You have the spleen, and I include the liver, since there's so many immune cells there. And then you have blood cells. And there are a number of blood cells, or we could call them immune cells, like the macrophages, which have chemicals like interleukin and interferon. We have B cells, which make specific poisons using their surface immunoglobulin. We have T cells, which have all different types of ways that they kill antigens and pathogens in your body. And there are other areas of the body that are so involved with making the chemicals that make these cells work, like the kidneys. And what happens when you start going down a road of trying to dissect a part of your anatomy and physiology, you realize it's impossible. If it was possible, we could remove all these parts and just walk around and be okay. But they're all interrelated, they all interact, and they can't work without each other. So you begin to see the ridiculousness of taking a system that's not only bones, thymus, spleen, liver, blood cells, lymphoid aggregations, the lymphatic system. Well, we can't discount the kidneys, of course. A lot of it happens through your red blood system, so the heart and circulatory system, and then a lot of it's emotional, and we'll get into that, so you got to think about what's going on in your brain. You can't just dissect a system. You can't separate the brain from the rest of the body. It just doesn't work. So the more detailed you get involved in any of these systems, the more you think, gosh, why are we trying to divide? Everything needs everything to work well. Probably one of the reasons so many people healed themselves of degenerative disease in my clinic was just because I used a wide spectrum program. One of my patients said one time that my program was like a landmine going off in all directions. I actually liked that because that's true. You do anything and everything, and wait till we get into the Incurables program in detail this afternoon. You want to talk about 1,000 things to do for ill health, we'll come up with them. So, back to picking pieces out of your body and pretending there's a system there. But this is important because as science progresses, they're blaming almost everything on bacteria and virus. You now hear that ulcers are created by a bacteria, not because the stock market crashed and your portfolio blew up, okay? Not because your dog got hit by a car, but because of a bacteria. They're now saying that heart disease is possibly caused by a virus. Couldn't be the hamburger, the cheeseburger, the fries, and the, well, if you're following the zone, it would be the Haagen-Dazs and the Boston cream pie. Get that off my desk. No, it's a virus. This will lead us down a real path. I love this guy. A real path of... One of these days we should get rubber bands. Whoop, whoop. Got it. That viral path, although there may be truth to that, will lead us down another path of irresponsibility or non-responsibility because we can eat anything, drink anything, think anything, just take chemotherapy, just take an antiviral drug. So I can see the way that the initial cell's subliminal message is coming in because the future, if you haven't realized it, and we will talk about it later, is prophylactic chemotherapy. Already 1 million women this year in America are taking prophylactic chemotherapy to see if it'll keep them from getting cancer. The pharmaceutical industry in the next 10 years is going to make drugs available like vitamin pills. And it's already happening. Okay, the bones. I don't know if there's much more I want to say about it, except for the fact that you can get the bone marrow stimulated and working again through good nutrition. The bone marrow is almost one of the genesis systems of the human body. They say that every immune cell, every blood cell starts off there. That's where it's made. Well, it can't do that with pepperoni pizza, okay? Or if it does, those macrophages might look like a piece of pepperoni as they stumble through your body, not doing anything. What is required for the bone marrow to be active and blasting out all the cells that you need for your body to build itself is great nutrition. And one of the things when doctors realized that that inactive can become active again was through super nutrition. Your body can only do, remember yesterday when we talked about digestion, assimilation, and elimination being the beginning of everything? What you're feeding in there is all that your immune system has to make all these cells and chemicals and do its job. If it's beer and French fries, you're going to have a beer and French fries immune system. And eventually that bone marrow is going to turn fatty and yellow and say, I give up. It doesn't have the fuel to operate on. But when you blast your body with super nutrition, I mean, I have seen my patients with superfood and the juicer go from being anemic with leukemia, where they were almost invisible, to being vibrant in 24 to 48 hours, and their blood tests skyrocketing and their bone marrow becoming active again. Yeah. So it all depends on the type of juice you're drinking. The lymphatic system, the vessels, the nodes, the ducts. This is the circulatory system for those immune cells, the B cells, the T cells, the macrophages. They move through this system. But unlike the circulatory system, it has no pump. It has no pressure. It relies on you to move your body for that whole system to flow through it. So one of the primary reasons that our lymphatic system slows down and gets congested is that we're not moving enough. Movement alone is what moves the lymph system. So this is why many people, especially in older eras, when you were sick, still suggested to exercise. There's a man named Gichin Funakoshi, a Japanese man who is considered to be the founder of modern-day karate, who studied in Okinawa in the 1800s. In his book, My Way, Karate, My Way of Life, he explains how when he studied with his Okinawan masters, he would go there and apologize for not being able to work out or do any karate forms or kata because he had a flu or a fever or a sickness. And he said, whenever I said that, they said, okay, work out twice as long today. Okay, and he could never understand that, but when he did what his master said, he got better faster. One of the reasons is the increase in circulation, the sweating, the diaphoresis, and the stimulation of the immune system. Now, we modify that to some degree. Gichin Funakoshi was a pretty tough dude, and so were these Okinawan teachers. But we modify it, but it is important to move when you are having a lymphatic problem or an immune problem. Regular exercise, moving the system. When the system gets clogged and you feel those lumps, you are having some type of infection going on, and your body's dealing with it. The lymphoid aggregations. It's interesting to note that all three of them are located in the gastrointestinal tract. Again, to check out any air, liquid, and solid that you take into your body, to sniff it, check it out, see if it likes it, and if it doesn't, it immediately communicates a message to the rest of your body that your immune system listens to. There is an immediate local reaction with your tonsils. They excrete competent lymphatic material, possibly B cells, T cells, macrophages. But they also send a message through your lymphatic system to the rest of your body and tell it what to do, to the Peyer's patches and appendix. So while the bad stuff's going down and they're trying to kill it and deal with it, there's already new work being done lower to make plans and get ready for the invading alien, creating a whole body immune response. And if you breathe something in and it goes into the lungs, you have a whole set of immune system inside there, but mainly the entire surface of the mucous membrane of the lung is covered with what are called alveolar macrophages, which just mean lung macrophages, a specific set of macrophages that are in your lungs that are there to eat up anything you may breathe in that could hurt you. And they surround it and they gobble it up. And when they die, after they've had a full load of all the horrible things that we can breathe in, they die, and that turns into mucus. And that's what you cough out as mucus. That's dead macrophages. Might look like green mucus to you, but it's teeny little dead macrophages. But it's a nice way to think about it, because you would never want to take a preparation during a cold or flu that would make you stop coughing. I remember going to a health show with Dr. Christopher, and he brought a big case of his fresh-made cough syrup. And we sold it. And then about an hour later, everybody brought it back and said, I want my money back. And I said, why? And they said, it made me cough more. And I looked over at Dr. Christopher and he goes, that's what it's supposed to do. It's called an expectorant. But in that era, all you could find in the drugstore were cough suppressants, because medicine wants to complement your lower self or your stupidity. So why have you irritated by a cough? Let's take some which was very big in those days, which had codeine in it, which puts your coughing and your pooping and you and everything else to sleep. And that's insane. Just a way to have more mucus in your lungs, drown on it, and have that bacteria have a better time. So many aspects of medicine that make you comfortable temporarily while the disease digs in and gets 100 times worse and then kills you. Because believe me, the second time around, it's no party. And I know all of you know that, because we've all suppressed stuff. So if your tonsils are swollen, what would that mean? That white blood cells have rushed to that area in such a degree that these tonsils swell up. So what's inside them? All types of immune cells. When your armpit nodes swell up, that means your body is responding correctly. If you're freaked out thinking, oh, but this is a precursor to cancer, well, get to work. Get to work. Help your body. Whenever you see something swelling up, it's a sign to get to work. Let me read you a page out of a immunology book here. Just a little bit about the tonsils. Without question, the lymphocytes, those are just your white blood. I can say this without burping my garlic. Thanks for the liver flush, guys. Without question, the lymphocytes, white blood cells, your immune cells, from the tonsils, lingual and palatine, which are the two names of the different tonsils, and the adenoids, are immunologically competent. These characteristics underscore the importance of the tonsils in the maintenance of immunity and provide strong evidence that argues against performing a tonsillectomy. Okay? This is not, a la Dr. Schultz here. This is out of immune texts. People tend not to read this part too well. It says here that tonsillar lymphocytes are known to synthesize antibodies against the polio virus. It goes on to say that an increased incidence of paralyzing poliomyelitis follows tonsil and adenoidectomy, suggesting that the removal of the tonsils in young children will impair their anti-polio immune mechanism. I don't think that's suggesting. When kids are tonsilized, they have a much greater increase of poliomyelitis. That means that the tonsils are important. And we also know that they are the area that makes the antibodies against poliomyelitis. It's also known that the incidence of Hodgkin's disease is higher amongst tonsillectomized individuals. To put that in a little simpler English, it means that when you have your tonsils cut out of your body, that your immune system is impaired. It's limping. It's limping. It's not doing so well. It's not able to secrete and develop certain protective aspects of your fluids of your body against major diseases. But don't worry, because you also have an appendix. Or do you? Think about that. Because that's your secondary lymphoid aggregation that is doing the same as the tonsils. And if you've had a tonsillectomy and an appendectomy, you've got 66% of the lymphoid aggregations in your body gone. And your immune system is, without any reasonable doubt, compromised severely. Now, I know some people in here have no tonsils and appendix, and they just broke into a sweat. The blessing of the human body is that it grows back your parts. And appendix and tonsils are famous for growing back 2 and 3 times because your body needs them. So don't freak out. Get the juicer out and grow yourself some tonsils and appendix. Yeah.
What if they don't grow back?
Keep working. Keep working. And luckily, there is one set of tonsils God must have known that you can't cut out and get to, the low ones. You can take out the adenoids and the other tonsils, but you can't get to these ones. So, and it's a good thing the Peyer's patches are deep inside your small intestine, or they'd have those suckers out in a heartbeat. But you're in medical school, and you're studying about the immune system, and that isn't on the test, what I just read you. So you don't have to memorize, you don't have to know it. If it's not something that's on the test, don't learn it. And then the next thing you know is your next class is surgery, and you're performing an appendectomy or a tonsillectomy. This year, well over 1 million kids in America will have their tonsils cut out, regardless that this book was published 15 years ago. And so it's confusing for a doctor because you're learning more and more about the new ideas of anatomy and physiology. And let me tell you, behind every door that science opens, God is standing there. I have seen that. Natural healing is standing there. And it gets a little scary if you're trying to live a life of techno-computer genetic engineering. Because medicine's starting to get answers which are frightening, and most of them are, these parts are needed. There was a divine plan going on here when this body was created. Yeah, I'm warming up for Sunday. I've had hundreds of people, thousands, come into my clinic, kids with tonsillitis, and never one had to have their tonsils removed. I had a woman bring her daughter in who had tonsillitis. And her husband, the child's father, was a medical doctor. And he came in too, because they were having a family dispute. He wanted the child to have a tonsillectomy. The child had been suffering for 3 or 4 years with swollen tonsils. And I just don't mean swollen. I mean the kind that when you open the mouth, you look, and it looks like ping pong balls, golf balls, and they're almost touching each other, and the child could hardly breathe. It's scary. And Dad wanted to perform an immediate tonsillectomy. Mom had heard that that would impair the immune system of the child. So they were fighting about this, and it was more of a marriage, family, and child counseling session than it was tonsillitis. But he got very mad when I gave him the speech you've just heard, and he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, Dr. Schultz." He goes, "You got a week or we're taking him out." And he got up and he stomped out of the office, and his wife looked at me and said, "He's such a jerk." And I'm like, hey guys, my clinic used to be like a World Wrestling Federation. But anyway, in a week, the child's tonsils were fine, and I've used a number of things, and certainly gargling with echinacea is wonderful. And we used in our clinic what we called children's echinacea because we mixed it with some fig syrup, tried to sweeten it up, and didn't use the parts of the plant that were as numbing and tingling as the stronger parts of the echinacea. It's more of a children's dose. It works really good. But to me, the real beauty was garlic. And some of you may think you can't get kids to take garlic. Well, when their tonsils are so big they can't breathe, you can get them to do a lot of things. Now, if they're really resistant, I would chop a piece of a fresh clove and put it in a little veggie gelatin cap and have them swallow that. But when they got a little used to it, we would make sure that it was in their superfood drink. You can put a little in. I mean, you know, Arthur juices at my house every day because I'm not going to do it, and I don't care if it's slave labor or not. He's in charge of the juicer. Oh, he could cut his hand off. He could kill himself. He's learning how to handle the juicer. And he juices all the time. Every day we have carrot apple. He doesn't like 100% carrot juice all the time. Okay, mix it down. Mix it down. You know, work with him. You got to work with the kids. And now that he's operating the juicer, juicing has become a part of his life. Now when he gets to be 20 or 30, it's not going to seem weird. It's going to seem like most people think throwing some bacon in a skillet or whatever. To him, it's going to be morning starts with juicing for the whole day. And we juice for the whole day. If I was ill, I'd juice every hour and put my mouth under the juicer. But we're juicing for the whole day. Like Arthur's the juicer in the house. I told him, you make the juice, right? Yeah.
Yes.
What's your favorite juice recipe, they want to know? What do you like to put through the juicer more than anything else?
Carrots and apples.
Yeah. Yeah, carrots and apples. Let's see this foot. Oh, just relax here. Well, remember what we had to do too? A big part of healing this was kisses. We had to do a lot of kisses, right? And then remember, we had to move your intestines around. Let me see. Where are your guts? And cardiopulmonary resuscitation, remember that? So we do some medical healing around the house too. What was I talking about? My son, I know, yeah. Yes. I'll be back here in a second. Tonsillitis. So then this young girl would chew a little piece, and it would be hot, so you can pick out the less hotter garlics. They're not as potent, but they work. And sometimes you can chop it up and put it in a little maple syrup and just have them swallow it. There's all sorts of ways. You can hide it in food. You know, if you're cooking, gosh, if you're eating cooked food, you can put 50 cloves in and hardly detect it until the next day. I mean, you know, so there's a lot of ways to get garlic into kids, but garlic is specific for tonsillitis and echinacea. And echinacea and garlic, to me, are a dynamic duo, and I will talk more about them later. But never, ever had a kid have to have its tonsils removed, even if it was a chronic syndrome, where 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times a year they were having the inflammation. And of course, after that, once we got through the inflammation, I would work them into the juices and the juicers and the lifestyle, and get the parents to stop fighting, all that good stuff. What's that? Yes, so when the tonsils swell, that means that white blood cells are rushing there so fast, the B cells, the T cells, the macrophages, that these glands swell up, these lymphoid aggregations swell up, and you get a fever. Yahoo! Now in the immune books, you'll see a fever often referred to as leukotaxis, or another complicated name, which means it's a process your body goes into on purpose. In fact, for every degree of temperature rise in your body, the speed at which your immune cells can travel is doubled. This is what leukotaxis means. So that means if you have immune cells that are going slow at your normal temperature, at a temperature of 104, they would be going 64 times faster than normal. That would be specifically so you could have more of them and they could get to the invaders faster. Suppressing a fever is the greatest way to kill someone, because you're going totally against the body. Remember I said, no matter what it looks like, guys, and I'm from New York, so I can say guys for generic humans. No matter what it looks like, it's your body doing the best it can. And a fever is a great response. In fact, there are competent blood cells like macrophages that when they're running towards the bad guy, the virus or the bacteria, they kind of wet themselves a little bit, and out comes chemicals like interleukin and interferon, which tell your body to raise its temperature so the macrophages can run faster. Why would you ever reduce a fever? And a couple decades ago, we noticed that when we gave kids with the flu aspirin to reduce their fever, it killed them. It's called rave syndrome, which is just a name for toxic shock syndrome, because if you reduce a fever, the macrophages are going to get pulled back, all the immune cells are going to fall down, and the bacteria and the virus is going to go, thank you very much, company. Does that make sense? Thank you very much, aspirin. Thank you. So now, what does science say? Don't take aspirin. I just read it's contraindicated for anybody under 18 now. Don't take aspirin for cold and flu. Suppress your fever with acetaminophen. Now you'll have something even better. It'll slow down your immune response, and then it'll kill your liver. Oh, yeah, we've got it all figured out now, right? I mean, it is that crazy, isn't it? Yes. The answer was yes. No. So there are no dangers. He's my cue card. There are no dangers to having high fevers. I have never seen anyone ever hurt by a fever. The key is you have to keep hydrated. You have to pour in the liquids. The minute you have a fever, you go into a juice flush and pour the liquids down, a minimum of a gallon, if not more, of water, herb teas, fresh juices. The only way that you can get brain damage from a fever is if you are suppressing it and if you are continuing to be toxic, okay? Many people, when they have a fever, think it's good to drink a cola and have chicken soup with salmonella and parasites in it. I'm sorry, but you find me a chicken without salmonella and parasites, and I'll find you some swamp land in Arizona. And everybody has this idea of what to do, and eat more, which taxes the immune system. And then the fever rises, and not drink enough. And then you get sicker. If you liquefy, if you add water to this system, your fever will be just fine. Just fine. Fever is wonderful. But remember, medicine was designed in many ways to support our lowest self, to make us comfortable, even if it goes totally against what the body is trying to do to protect us, heal disease, and save us. And we're entering a new millennium now, a new era, a new century, where we're going to acknowledge that these aren't curses, but this is the way that our body takes care of us. But see, that's the same way with fever, and it's the same way with headaches. You get a headache, you have pain in your head. You reach for something to kill the pain. Well, that's like if all of a sudden the fire alarm right there goes off in this building, and I tell that man to stop the camera, get the ladder, and hit it with a hammer. Maybe we ought to think about seeing if there's a fire and getting out of the building. Do you see what I'm saying? But instead, we've learned to think about all our body's reaction, whether it's coughing mucus or osteoporosis or headaches and fevers, as being bad, and we need to take something to stop it right away. What we need to do is understand why our body is doing this and create a natural healing lifestyle so our body will build up, and all these headaches and problems and lung disorders and kidney disorders and heart disorders and osteoporosis and fevers, chills, and it'll just go away. It'll go away. That's the cure for disease. Yes? Yeah, I'll clap for myself on that I wasn't stimulating applause. I'm just as excited about this as you. And often when we edit the videos, Sally says the biggest problem with the soundtrack is the person who sits next to you that's clapping so loud. And after a few years, she said, "It's you!" She goes, "You're always just clapping." And so they've trained me to, tie my hands behind my back and not clap so loud for my excitement about freedom from medicine and drugs. Because I'm very excited about it, I think you can tell. Well, I saved my butt. I would be dead. You heard my heart story. I got a new hand, and every doctor said I'll never have skin on this hand. I got it back. And you have to pay more to hear that story. And I'm walking on a leg that they said I was crippled for life. Dr. Christopher, one of my great teachers, was crippled in a wheelchair when he was 30 years old and attending herbal school. And I worked with him up into his 70s, and he wasn't in a wheelchair at all and feeling great. You just don't have to take the hand you've been dealt. It's up to you how you're going to play it. Okay, let's talk about the appendix, because we're still talking about lymphoid aggregations. We've talked about the tonsils and the adenoids. The appendix is also immune competent. It's part of your immune system. First of all, let me draw. It's time to draw pictures. Human body is such an amazing thing. When I look at it and study anatomy and physiology, I'm in absolute awe. Often in medical school, you almost begin to look at the human body as the enemy, as the antagonist. Oh, well, it's your gallbladder acting up. Don't worry, Mrs. Jones, we'll get you fixed up and get rid of that. The appendix, the tonsils, it's your body kind of going against you, instead of just breathing and understanding. Now, this is simple, isn't it? Why do you think a system of medicine doesn't operate this way? Partly because we have asked them, "Doc, I don't want to hear about macrophages. Give me some dope so I can get rid of my headache, so I can get my ass back to work and support my family." Right? We've done our part in the ignorance. The only rule they've broken is the Hippocratic Oath. Now, the only rule the doctors have broken is not kicking our ass when we said that and saying, "You sit right back down in that chair like I did," or maybe like I did, grab them by the back of the neck. I used to use the cold shower in my bathroom often to put their head under and see if that would get their attention. I've been known to physically slap and pinch and wrestle with a patient if I thought that would help. I have lawsuits to prove it. But it's that education. We have to stop. So many medical experts I meet think that we are so dumb. They look at us like the dumbest, stupidest group of morons you cannot believe. And they just make decisions based on what they think we will or will not do. The big difference with me is I am a big believer in people. I love people. And as I travel the world, I don't see what the medical experts say. I see a lot of cool dudes and dudesses, okay? I see a lot of great people that if are given an opportunity would rather do something that makes common sense and makes them feel better than something that will drain their nest egg and leave them crippled and maimed and sick. I just don't see what many people think that the masses, you're just not ready for the truth. You're just not ready to be told. I'm shocked at how often I talk to professors and they go, "Well, they just wouldn't understand, so that's why we do it this way." I understand. You guys understand. It's not so complex. The appendix. So when the appendix is swollen and you have appendicitis, what would that mean? It's inflammation of the appendix, and why? Because your immune system is going into action. Your appendix is filling up with white blood cells, B cells, T cells, and macrophages to combat something in your body or intestinal tract that's hurting you. Possibly a fecalith obstructing the lumen, or you could relate that to Thanksgiving aftershock. But something is causing you to go into immune reaction. Again, you don't want to cut out the appendix or reduce the fever. You have to work with the body to heal itself. Same as tonsillitis. I often find that people don't understand the appendix and think of it as different than the tonsils. It is not. And it's in a beautiful location. Wow. If we're looking at the bottom of your ascending colon, it's called the cecum. And as your food dumps in here from your small intestine that you've theoretically assimilated most of the nutrition of, it falls into the trap in here into the bottom. And then it has to start the long uphill journey up to your hepatic flexure, transverse colon, splenic flexure, down your descending colon, through your sigmoid and out the rectum. But this is the only area in your body where that fecal matter has to move against gravity, uphill. And so your appendix excretes fluids. Some of those fluids increase peristalsis. And so it helps the muscular contractions to get uphill, to get that fecal matter uphill. Some of the fluids are lubricants to get that granite hard log uphill. Or maybe the 5-foot snake from our volunteer, crusader. I know he's sweating back there when I said that. But many fluids that are immune fluids. Because the appendix is not only checking for an alien, but it's reacting and responding and sending out immune cells to make sure nothing in there is going to hurt you. Because the junk food industry is doing its best to hurt you. Dr. Norman Walker, who was a tremendously awesome, great naturopath, who lived to be so old nobody knows. Maybe he's still alive, he just wanted to get away from us.
109.
What's that? 109.
He passed away several years ago.
Yeah, just a brilliant man, has written a lot of tremendous books on health, was a raw foodist, an organic gardener. His books are kind of not hip, according to a lot of the health community these days, but there's a powerful message and information there. He has a lot of books on juicing and vibrant health. And he believed and said that the cecum was the ground for parasites. And we'll learn later that some of our immune cells are specifically designed to kill parasitical infections. This is a nasty area here, okay? Because it can just start getting built up with sediment if you're constipated. I mean, imagine, this is a trap. What happens to the trap under your sink or in your toilet or your bathtub? Okay, you have to get a plumber to come to your house and snake it out. This is a trap here. It builds up with stuff, you know, and if you go down sometimes through the bottom of the cecum, it's like taking a core sample of the crust of the earth. I mean, you can end up finding, you know, a fudgesicle you ate when you were 12 stuck down here. I'm paraphrasing slightly. And imagine this appendix can't even work if your bowel's dirty. It can't get those fluids out and things start getting stuck. And this can be the beginning of constipation right here because it comes out of the ileocecal valve here and drops into that cecum. So we got to keep the bowel clean so that appendix can work. So when it's inflamed, it's not just something like, oh, one day, oh, you know, last Tuesday all of a sudden I had appendicitis. You have been building it and creating it for years. So a very important immune organ, a big part of your immune system, a lymphoid aggregation, helps to move bowel matter against gravity, excretes immune cells, lubricating fluids, and 100 billion other things that we haven't figured out and discovered yet, right? The Peyer's patches are also immune aggregations in the lining of your small intestine. Again, to detect and warn your immune system if there's something that's in your small intestine ready to be assimilated that could hurt you, and get your whole immune system working. You know, there's recent studies I read. Your spleen is way up over here, and of course the bowel would be down here. Your spleen has a number of jobs. It expands and contracts to change your blood volume in your body, but it's coated, it's almost solid white blood cells. And your spleen is just loaded with white blood cells. So your spleen is a blood reservoir. Your blood is coming in there. And while it's in your spleen, all these white blood cells are sniffing, checking, killing, doing their job, checking that blood. It's a big blood checkpoint. And it does this very actively. It's an active part of your immune system. Now medicine knows that when your appendix is removed, your spleen doesn't do this very well. Wow! But there's no wire that connects your appendix to your spleen found in the human body. How could that be? Because all the parts work together. I can't really go over that enough. All these parts work together. If you do not have a spleen, if you do not have tonsils, if you do not have an appendix, your immune system's compromised. So create a lifestyle for yourself that's stronger and healthier so you can live still to be 800. Your thymus is an organ in your body that your white blood cells and your immune cells flow through at a beginning stage. And that's where they are educated. And it's named the thymus after a thyme leaf because it has a similar shape. And they are educated there and separated, and especially the T cells. Again, why they're called T cells is because they've known after they've removed people's thymus that your T cells don't get educated and don't get formed. And we talked about the spleen, and the liver is also loaded with white blood cells. Remember, we talked about the liver's job was to filter that blood and take out toxins and poisons. Well, the taking out means eating, digesting, dissolving, killing. And those are white blood cells in your liver that do that, especially macrophages and many other types.
There's a question.
Yeah, I heard it. We'll do our questions a little later. Write them down. Don't forget them. Let's take a look at the blood cells. One of the reasons I like to talk to you a bit about this chart here, which you'll find just after page 25, is because you hear a lot about this nowadays. You hear interleukin and interferon. You hear T cells and B cells and immunoglobulin, even when they're talking about hepatitis. And so I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're talking about with these cells and what goes on in your body in a cellular mediated immune response. Daniel, I forgot when break time is, and does anybody know what break time is? 10:50. Okay. We might just run, Daniel, you can let them know, we might just run a hair over because I'd like to finish this, and then we can, well, you know what? No, it's so close to break time. Let me take a couple questions, and then when we come back, we'll go over the blood cells trip, the path that it takes, and how all the different blood cells work to kill different invaders and their job together. And it'll help you then when you read an article about T cells, B cells, immunoglobulin, and all of that. Yes, ma'am. Hi. The question is why would the thymus atrophy when a person gets about 20 or 25? Is this someone you know? Yeah. Just the average American lifestyle. We find that off many parts of the body atrophy. Also at this time, it's thought that most of the red active bone marrow starts turning yellow and inactive. I believe when I first really saw into this human body, I really came to understand and know that the ages stated in the Old Testament were real. It was not somebody's miscalculation of old counting versus new counting. This body's not designed to die at 55. My mom and my dad both died at 55 years of age. The average age in America is in the early 70s. This thing isn't designed to disrupt and die in 70s. This vehicle that we have is absolutely designed to live hundreds of years. 3, 4, 5, 6, 800. I have no idea how far it can go. It might even self-perpetuate at some point if we got healthy for a while, at least. The point I'm making is we have done something very wrong, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, to get this thing to die so quickly, and to where our thymus degenerates and stops functioning in the 20s, and our bone marrow stops working in the 30s. And the real answer to that is spiritual, emotional, physical degeneration. We have learned a lot of things to do that aren't good for this unit. Now, I don't know if anybody in here is going to make it to 200, although the longest living person on the planet that I'm aware of was about 240 in India, documented through town and records and religious records. So we do know that people can live incredibly long. The point is what's going to happen to Arthur? Arthur, knowing at 5 how to juice and use a juicer, and having one of his favorite after lunch foods is carrot sticks dipped in hummus, and living a life like that with a lot of love, already in his life of 5 years, even though I'm an incredibly busy man, he has seen me 100 times more than I ever saw my dad. And he's got a billion more hugs and kisses because I don't remember any. And he has a whole different life. What is going to happen to this boy? I mean, you think he's my son. He's actually my laboratory rat experiment. But he's going to be happier, healthier, have more love, joy, energy, and vitality than I did. And what's going to happen to his children and their children and their children? I absolutely believe that the people in this room on this path, we will create generations of people that will live to be 200, 300, 500, and 800. On the other hand, the generations of people that are born in test tubes, to parents who were so sickly they could not have children. And we're going to talk about that in reproduction. And the children of parents who, I was in somewhere the other day and some kid was crying and screaming. It was about 4 months old. I knew it wanted a nipple and milk. What it got was a wadded up whole slice of bologna stuffed in its mouth, which gagged it. Okay? That is going to create future generations of people that die in their 20s and 30s. What's exciting is what we are doing is not only increasing our longevity, but breaking the rules of so-called modern science by these organs not shutting down, and if they do, turning back on. So let's, Okay. Let's talk a bit about the blood cells, especially the ones that come into play with our immune system. You'll see at the top of this chart, there's my picture of the bone. And that's my picture of a bone with a bone marrow inside it. In case you're wondering what that odd-shaped thing is. That's your funny bone. And it says stem cell. Hemocytoblast. There's other names for it. But most doctors agree that the stem cell is the cell from which all other cells or blood cells are made. And then you get a division on the chart that goes to the left and to the right. And to the right it goes into a lymphoid stem cell, which is believed to be the precursor cell to all or most of our immune cells, like the T cells and the B cells. On the left side, that is mostly for the formation of red blood cells. You'll see on the left blood platelets. It starts with the stem cell, moves over to the megakaryocyte, and when it's mixed with certain chemicals in your body, that turns into blood platelets. You can go to the erythroid stem cell, and that turns into an erythrocyte or a red blood cell, with approximately 2,400,000 per second being built, with an average lifespan of 120 days. You can see that also coming off the left side is a myeloid stem cell, which can create either what's called a monocyte when it is in your bloodstream, or a macrophage when it is in your tissues of your body. And you can see that the macrophage is kind of a strange large drawing because it is the largest of the immune cells. And that little thing extending off of it sometimes is called a pseudopod, but a macrophage can throw out an arm and grab a hold of a bad guy and yank it in and gobble it up. And sometimes it was helpful for certain of my techno patients to have an idea of this and imagine this going on in their body. The myeloid stem cell, still on the left side, can also turn into a granulocyte stem cell. And you have three major types of granulocytes called neutrophils, basophils, and eosinophils. And they're called the same when they go into also your tissue. And those are involved mainly with allergic responses, eating up certain types of bacteria and virus, and especially parasites. These are the parasite killers for parasitical infections. On the right side of the chart, you will see that certain lymphoid stem cells maybe turn into T lymphocyte cells, or maybe that happens in the thymus, where they can be turned into a number of T lymphocyte cells. We've all heard about T killer cells, and they do exactly that. They kill things that aren't you or could hurt you. We have T suppressor cells that slow down the immune response once the war has been won. And we have T helper cells that communicate between that cell, the disease, and other immune cells and tell everybody what's going on. They're like the walkie-talkies. On the right side, you have a lymphoid stem cell turning into a B lymphocyte. And no one knows where they're educated. They're called B for the bursa of Frobiscus in a bird, which is where it's thought that a bird's B lymphocytes are educated. In us, it's not known. It's theorized and argued about from professor to school to other professor and other school. Many people think it might be in the bone marrow, but most are disagreeing with that now. Some people feel that it may happen in the intestines. Others feel that it may be the Peyer's patches or one of the other lymphoid aggregations like the tonsils, oops, or the appendix, oops. Possibly the spleen or the liver, but it is unknown at this particular time where the B cells are educated. I don't care, and I never have. That information did not get my patients well. But I want to point this out because a basic knowledge of the blood cells and where they come from and how they're built is helpful when you're reading a lot of medical literature or even articles in Time or Newsweek magazine that might say T cell, B cell, immunoglobulin, bone marrow, inactive bone marrow, and hopefully garlic and echinacea. Although, as you'll see today, one magazine did not. To give you a little bit of an idea of what can happen in your body when you have an antigen or a pathogen come in, it could look like this. Invading into your body comes a force of an antigen. It's actually one word, but I broke it up so you could see the word, or a pathogen. Anti means again, and genesis means, or gen, the creation, the beginning. This would be against the beginning of life, or against life, anti-life. It could have easily said anti-life, and we would have understood it easier, right? Or maybe even bad guy. A pathogen, pathos is the Greek word for disease. And again, the creation of disease, the beginning of disease. It could have easily been called disease causing. Medicine likes to get away from simple names. It makes medicine seem too simple and understandable for the rest of us. They do not like to use the word toxic, and for years it was banned and now it's coming back. They like to remove the simple names, use a lot of Greek, some Latin, and make things complicated. And it just doesn't need to be that way. So we have antigens and pathogens. These could be dust, mold, bacteria, pollen, virus, fungus, plastic dust, paint fumes, anything that's toxic, parasites. The list goes on and on and on, forever. But when these come into your body and your body is invaded, first your body will detect that, usually with the tonsils, the appendix, the Peyer's patches, a lymphoid aggregation, and it immediately has a response. One of the initial responses is a macrophage coming right in to combat. Macrophage, macro means big and phage means eating, so it just means essentially big eater. It would have been a lot easier if they would have just called it glutton. A macrophage wants to go immediately and kill that non-self, what isn't you. Go there immediately. And that's the macrophage's job. If a lot of macrophages are called in and they get an initial message from other macrophages or cells we're going to talk about in a minute that there is a major invasion, like, gosh, this isn't just one breath of pollen. It was a... wait a minute. It was a cheeseburger, because we'll have to cut that. Then the macrophages will leak liquids into your lymphatic system, and sometimes these liquids are interleukin, interferon, and these are messages to other cells that there's a big attack coming. And we got a lot of work to do. Send reinforcements. Now, if your system is congested or clogged, and you haven't exercised and you're eating a lot of gluey foods and poison yourself on an hourly level, this message can get very diluted and maybe not get there. You know, there's a famous story in Britain, and most of my teaching has been done in Europe, in schools all over Europe, in Spain and France and Italy and Germany and England especially, because I can speak English better than those other languages. I can speak American better than English. And that message can get diluted. Then that message might not get there, and these chemicals don't get picked up, and it fouls it up. And some of these messages are to do certain things. One of them we already talked about is to increase the temperature of the human body, to start raising the temperature. Why would the macrophage call for... Oh, I remember what I was going to say. There's a great British story about communication. And in a British war, I believe it was the Boer War in South Africa, the British sent a message, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. By the time that message was carried by person and person back to the rear, the person who finally came in with a message says, I don't know what they said, but it says, send 3 or 4 pence, we're going to a dance. Now, it's a good thing for the South Africans that that message didn't get through. These messages can get diluted. The Europeans laugh at that joke much more. I guess you got to be English or something. The message can get diluted, but if the message gets through to increase the temperature, it is only these reinforcements, instead of walking or crawling there, can now get on the Autobahn, can now get on the superhighway and go 1, 2, 4, 6. See, it multiplies. For every degree of temperature rise, it's doubled. That means for a 99 temperature, it's 2, but for 100 temperature, it's 4 and 8 and 16. And it keeps going up, 32, 64. It's a major increase. Now we're getting a great advancement of macrophages to the bad guy because of the material that they're leaking to raise our temperature up. Secondly, you have T cells coming in. And the T killer just comes in and kills. It just kills the bad guy. The T helper cell comes in and goes, hey guys, what's going on? What's happening? And this T killer cell may say, well, we got a real fight on our hands. This is a nasty hamburger. And the T helper cell goes, okay, and it goes out and communicates this information to a lot of other cells. One of the cells it'll communicate to is a B cell. Now, a B cell has a very interesting chemical, or number of different chemicals on the surface, called immunoglobulin. And it uses these chemicals, and there used to be 3, now there's 5, maybe there'll be 7 types of immunoglobulin, sometimes referred to as letters like that, IAG. Immunoglobulin, the B cell uses that to make a specific poison. This is chemical warfare now. So if this is a particular type of a bacteria or a virus or pollen or a bee sting, whatever it is, the B cell starts synthesizing and what's called an antibody or an antibody towards a specific killer for this. An antibody, the body of this material. Develops an antibody and then goes in and sprays it like chemical warfare on this. There is another cell called a T suppressor cell that stays a bit in the background. But now this, I'll go back to the B cell for a minute. This can take a while. It can take 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. That's why when you poison yourself with a cheeseburger, it can go on for a while. Your body might take a while to respond. If it recognizes, the immune system has memory. It has surveillance. It checks out, and it has memory. If it has the memory, oh, I know, this is like that cheeseburger you ate yesterday. Or this is like the cold you got a month ago, or the infection you got. If it has the memory, it can produce those chemicals very quickly from its memory banks. Because the T helper cell and even the macrophages help the B cell know exactly what it was. And it goes, oh, I remember that. It makes the chemicals immediately and goes out. If it's a new strain of a influenza, it might take a week for the B cell to figure this out. The T suppressor cell checks out the war. And if we are winning and it's time to shut down, the suppressor cell gives messages to macrophages, gives messages to B cells, and probably 1,000 ways chemically to your other cells and says, okay guys, we've won the war, you can start backing off and backing down and go back to your normal state. Just like in war, we have states of, DEFCON 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The alarm bells are the macrophages going into a bad guy and eating it up and excreting chemicals to increase your fever, to get more there, sending alert signals over to the killer cells to come on in and help me, the helper cells to tell the B cells what kind of poisonous warfare we need, and the suppressor cells come in to say it's all over and you can stop now. It can get a lot more complicated, but this is already, for me, too complicated, meaning that it's really not necessary to know this to have a strong, healthy immune system. In fact, often in medical school, just learning this depresses your immunity. Let's talk a little bit about inoculations and vaccinations, because this is important with the immune system. At the turn of the century in America was really the beginning of the wonder drug era. I mean, it got big in the fabulous 50s, but the turn of the century it was big. And I talked about that already. And if you haven't ever studied that, it's quite fascinating because most of the richest families in the world and politicians invested in pharmaceutical medicine. And the majority of them did not believe in it nor use it. Most of them at that time used herbal medicine, but they did not see a future in herbal medicine, and they saw a great future in patented secret formula chemical medicines that instead of having to gather plants, you could make them out of horse urine. You could make them out of feces and mold. And you could charge 1 billion times more than you could for herbs because not everybody could make these. It was a great investment. And these people became the bigger, richest people of the world. And we're talking about the, all of them. Within 10 years of this onslaught of chemical medicine, we had a virus that killed millions of people around the world. In fact, in 1918 alone, 20 million people died. And if you don't remember or you don't know someone that does, go to the library, because in America, they were loading people into buses and streetcars that were dead to get the bodies off the street. Now, we're not talking very long ago. They turned public transportation into hearses to get the bodies off the street in American cities. I'm not talking about the bubonic plague of 1660 in England here, guys. We're talking about 1918 in America. It wiped out a major percentage of many cities' populations. Now that virus and most viruses are communicable by air and by people. And they didn't have any airplanes back then. Imagine what we could do with a virus like that today, where I can be in New York in 4 hours and in Hong Kong in 14. Imagine what kind of worldwide killer disaster we could have if we had a Spanish flu or a diphtheria invasion in this day and age. And I can guarantee you one is coming. And this does not come from some religious prophecy, I want you to know. It just comes from reading and knowing and understanding medicine and the human body and disease. We always have these. And they attack hard and fast, and people will die. Hundreds of millions, maybe billions, will die the next time around. One of the ways we treated people at that time, or shortly later, was with tonsillectomies. Because their tonsils inflamed, we cut them out. Shortly after that, there was a massive polio outbreak, which went across America and the world, and killed many, poliomyelitis. Shortly after that, Dr. Salk developed a polio vaccine. And not too far after that, the cancer rate skyrocketed in America. We're going to talk about cancer later. Last year in America, medical doctors prescribed millions of prescriptions for antibiotics when they knew that antibiotics wouldn't work, especially for colds and flus. And this was reported in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And I think it was, I can't remember the exact number, it was 12 million or 60 million. But a big chunk of the antibiotics were prescribed, well, the doctors blamed it on the patients. They said it was patient pressure that forced their hand to write the prescription. And I'm not kidding, this was in the JAMA article. My patients pressured me a lot, and then I pressured them with my foot in their rear end. We have a modern medical pharmaceutical germ attack going on today. We have computer-assisted microscopes that let doctors see deeper into the body, and they're creating very refined, complex drugs. We're inoculating kids when they're hours old. And at the same time, I've mentioned we're forcing fertility, so we're creating weaker kids, and then we're poisoning them with an hour of being born. Vaccination and inoculation, by many authorities, is considered to be a fallacy. And I'll tell you why. Throughout history, way before modern medicine, all diseases did what they call ran its course. Which means that people got sick and a lot of people died. And then for some reason, we went on. People survived. Not everybody got killed by the Black Plague, or we wouldn't be here, or the bubonic plague. Not everybody got killed by diphtheria or the Spanish flu. We went on. Diseases run sometimes what scientists call a bell curve, which just means it kind of looks like a bell. And what that means is a disease starts out, or a bacteria or a virus mutates and becomes a new herder or killer to us. Once it finds its host, which is anybody who eats cheeseburgers and milkshakes, it can grow rapidly. It has a lot of food or a lot of garbage. As it's growing rapidly, people are dying rapidly. And medicine's looking for a cure. And the cure might be here, soybeans. But people are still dying. So maybe the cure is here. Send Dr. Schultz your money, and just the act of sending me your money will cure you. But the disease progresses. In pharmacy, they call this the golden spot. What that means is whatever you come up with here, you're going to be a trillionaire. It will appear to the general public that this is causing the rapid decline of the disease. But what's causing the rapid decline of the disease is your immune system. Your B cells have figured it out. They've created chemicals to poison it. Your macrophages got there in enough numbers, and you killed it. If you want to be a I can spell this M-U-L-T-I, and how do you spell gazillion? If you want to be a multi-gazillionaire, just keep trying to find that pill cure for a virus or a bacteria or AIDS or whatever, and you're going to be at some point where the human body decides to turn around and you're going to be rich because everybody's going to think it's the cure. Many doctors of immunology, virology, and pharmacy now believe that many of these things we think worked didn't really work. The body just developed an immunity. So it's important to understand that, because I'm going to tell a story. When diphtheria hit, we came up with a crude vaccine. Probably caused more people to die than the disease. Although in all the medical books it's claimed to be the savior of mankind. Not true. After that we did tonsillectomies. And that seemed to solve the problem temporarily. But then we had a massive polio outbreak in America. And polio maimed and crippled and killed a lot of people. Poliomyelitis. Dr. Salk developed his vaccine, but after it was used on me 3 times and numerous other people, see, it was developed in the 50s and 60s under 50s and 60s equipment. And when they looked at it, see, they make vaccines from like the pus of pigs, their kidneys that were killed with poliomyelitis, and then they take the pus out and sterilize it, theoretically, and then put it into you. Well, they did this with a polio vaccine, made it from the pus from pigs' kidneys, and unfortunately, the sterilization methods of those days were crude, and we looked at it and we said, hey, it's great. This is terrific. No problem. Put it into millions of people, looked back at it in the 1970s and said, whoops, because the tools of the 1970s allowed us to see that there were 149 live viruses living in that vaccine that we injected everybody with. Now just one of those, now we see even more because we have better tools than in the 70s. Medicine now admits that the polio epidemic was caused by the tonsillectomies done after the diphtheria outbreak. It was done in response to diphtheria. The problem is the tonsils, according to what we know of immunology, are the only organ, remember, that can synthesize the antibody using the immunoglobulin on a B cell in the tonsils for poliomyelitis. Remember, I read that out of the immune book. The only area of the body that can do that. So by cutting out the tonsils of all these people, they could no longer defend themselves from poliomyelitis. Medicine now admits that the polio epidemic came from tonsillectomies, and then spread from there and got stronger from there. But no problem, because we came up with a vaccine for polio, but then we discovered in the 70s that it was tainted. We recalled it, but it was just a little bit too late because most of the people in this room already have it. Just one of the live viruses has been called the SV40 virus. I call it from the Salk vaccine. 40 virus, and the SV40 virus is now found inside almost every cancer cell, and the incidence of cancer since the polio vaccinations has skyrocketed to the point, as we talk about cancer later, almost everybody will have a cancer in their lifetime starting the next millennium. That's how bad it is. So look at the stack of dominoes. Look at what we have created. Look at what we've created with our egos, thinking that we were smart enough to go against God, to go against nature, to go against the human body. Yeah, to go against the human body and snip out parts and inject pig pus into our bodies to combat disease. Although some stupid, moronic doctors still stand proud for the Salk vaccine or tonsillectomies, medical history now after a century is uncovering the horrendous failure of medicine and science and how we killed and maimed millions of people and unleashed in all of us toxic viruses that will mutate and may kill many of us. Not in this room, but you know, the other guys, the burger group. This is just one of the classic examples you'll uncover in the study of medicine of how it doesn't work. Cutting out a part, but it took 100 years to discover the connection between tonsillectomies, poliomyelitis, the polio vaccine, and cancer. We don't have 100 years. The key is don't cut parts out of the human body and don't break the skin with a needle for any reason. If you follow those rules, we would never had this problem. Sure, but some doctors say, well, many would have died. Well, that's life. Nature constantly, selectively kills the weak. Constantly. You can see it in wheat. If a wheat kernel starts to mutate, that field will die out. And you wonder, well, why does that field die out? No matter how much fertilizer we gave it, and another field does well, because it was starting to become weaker. The weak get removed. This is a basic of nature, and it's a divine basic. Why would we want to continue races of sickly, crippled people that eventually we'd all have to live inside a cellophane bag, you know, with a Ziploc? Oh man, you look groovy, but don't touch my Ziploc. You know what I'm saying? We would have to live inside some plastic environment with highly filtered air with alcohol in it or something. And so selectively, nature comes along with diphtheria, with polio, and I guess with medical doctors too, to weed out the weak. And the strong shall survive. Now let me tell you in here, those who live their life on the path of physical, emotional, and spiritual health, they are the survivors. And we know who the weak are because right now, instead of being in here, they're in line at right? So this is a divine plan, and this is what happens. What we would like to do is share our message with others so more and more people can get involved in this. Hey, we'll talk about death later. That is an inevitable physical end. The question is having a long, healthy life. So the answer, people are always saying to me, well, what's the best defense? The best defense against AIDS or cancer or any virus or any antigen and pathogen, the best defense is probably to get inside a plastic bag, but before you do that, staple gun 50 mil plastic all over your house and probably suck the air out of it too. That's probably the best. But if you're not going to do that, which I didn't see anybody get real excited when I said that, if you're not going to do that, then the best defense is a strong offense. That's all we can do. And we create that strong offense by building up our body, making our T cells and our B cells thrive on carrot juice so they become killing monsters to anything that comes near us. In my clinic for 20 years, I sat with dead and dying. I had an AIDS victim with throat cancer, and when I was working in his mouth, he puked all over me. Some of it went in my mouth. I can't tell you what I have been exposed to. Do I look sick? If I were to go under medical scrutiny, I'd probably test positive for everything. Because I've had it. Believe me, there were pools of blood and pus in my office that you would not believe. Anisha was horrified when she came there. And I'm not even talking yet about the snakes in the toilets. Okay? I have been surrounded by this, engulfed in this. I have actually breathed it and physically ingested this matter on occasion. And I didn't wear one of those plastic shields and rubber gloves. I hug these people and embrace them. The point is, the only way we're ever going to defend ourselves from the onslaught is to create the strongest, healthiest body we can. And that's the basis of this lifestyle. Now, if you decide to go ahead and vaccinate yourself or your children, and don't feel bad if you already have, we're all on the path. Instead of looking back into the past and whipping and kicking your butt, how about loving and congratulating yourself for getting in this room? Okay, yeah. We've done enough butt kicking, guys, okay? We've done enough beating ourselves up. Let's start loving ourselves for the positive steps. Hey, I had the polio vaccine twice, and it tasted so darn good because they cherry flavored it. I got back and snuck in line again and got it a third time. Okay, now if I want, I can go back and freak myself out in the SV40 virus and have a freak out, or I can sit in my jacuzzi and kiss myself and have a great day. The key is what you are doing here and now. Tomorrow is what you do and believe today. People still vaccinate and inoculate. Children that are vaccinated have a 75% increase in juvenile diabetes. Children who are vaccinated have a 60% increase in asthma. Children who are vaccinated often look like mutants, because I see where my son plays. Sorry, that was a personal one. But you know, I can't help it, because my son, I take him to parks where we play. Keep him away from the schools, but I take him to the parks, and all the kids have like tubes in their ears and green mucus running out their nose. I don't know what that is. Yeah, it's dairy. Thank you very much. It's absolutely. That's Elmer's glue coming right out the nose with a little macrophage to make it green. Do you know that there has never, ever been a case of autism in the United States until we started doing vaccinations? It started right after that. I can't begin to tell you in the next century what we're going to look back and see. It's not going to be just Dr. Salk's vaccine. It's going to be anything we inject, because we will never be able to see everything that's in there, nor know enough about anatomy and physiology to get away with that. There was a man, and you heard my information from Keith Thompson on vaccinations. You know, it's not easy being a parent. You can look at it that way. But if you're going to be a parent, well, then just make a decision right off the bat that you're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to choose between life and death. My moms would say, well, but if either suppose I have my baby at home and something goes wrong. Things go wrong. They do. You fix it when things go wrong. I asked Ganesha how she felt about that, and of course her greatest fear in her entire life is ever going to a doctor or to a hospital. That's always been her greatest fear. It really is. I'm not so afraid. I kind of like it. I like to hang around there. Hey, yeah, go ahead. Cut my finger off. Let's see what happens, you know. I'll try to grow another one. I mean, I interact, argue, fight. But that's her greatest fear. So I said, well, what if there's a problem when Arthur's born? And she said, what problem? And I couldn't think of any, but I said, a problem, a mystery problem. And she said, I would rather take him and hug him and feel his heart stop in my arms than go into a hospital and experience any nightmares. She says, I would not be able to live with that. Yeah. So she's a pretty tough dude. Yes. you begin to get that way, and it's not irresponsible or unconscious. It's just making a choice. We made a choice not to inoculate our son with anything. Some people say, gosh, they could die. Well, they could die with it. They could die without it. You have to make decisions. The decision is following a path of physical, emotional, and spiritual health and not wavering from that and doing the best you can. I don't judge. I just give information, judge much. I just give information so people have an opposite point of view available, so they have a choice against medicine and pharmaceuticals. There was a man in La Jolla, California named Rave who decided to build a very intensive microscope. See, nowadays we have electron microscopes where we can see bacteria and virus very well. But the problem is an electron microscope kills what you're looking at, so it's really hard to look at it for more than 1/1000th of a second. Rife, way back in the 30s and 40s, knew the problem is if you're looking at something very far away, you have to keep putting more lenses in and more glass in. And the problem with microscope evaluation becomes eventually what you're looking at, you can't see it anymore because the light has to go through all this glass which knocks down the light and it's black. So lighting is more important with a microscope than anything else, and there were no powerful lights. And he built almost what could be considered a very crude laser type of lighting apparatus so he could see in the most powerful microscope that ever existed. When he did that, he could actually see bacteria and virus alive for the first time. He then noticed that all the virus and bacteria were vibrating, but at different speeds. Because when you look under a microscope, you see a lot of stuff looking like this. And he thought that maybe if he could alter the speed of their vibration, it would mess them up and stop them. So he developed also a machine like an oscillator that would create sound waves and went in and messed up their speed. And when he did so, they died. So he then tried the sound waves on his patients at these precise measurements, and their cancer went away. Now, I'm not a total advocate of this type of medicine because there's not a lot of education there unless you're telling that person to eat right, move their bowels, exercise, and kiss themselves. Okay? But he noticed, but I find it very interesting that soon after that, his clinic was raided by the military of the United States and the federal government, and all his papers were confiscated and burnt, and his machinery was smashed up. I find that very interesting. And what he said, and what some theorize, and even modern scientists say, is maybe virus, bacteria, they're the same, they're mutating. What I want to point out is that we're in a very raw state of immunology and understanding the bad guys, which are really the, government, and I meant the antigens, the ATF, the FBI, the fungus. I'm sorry, I get them all combined. But we go back to the only defense is a strong offense. So let's talk about that now. Some of the ways that we can strengthen our immune system so we don't have to get the plastic and the staple guns and live in a plastic bubble. Remember I mentioned that the lymphatic system did not have a way to circulate. It needed to be pumped by muscular contraction. There are many ways to increase the way that your lymph flows through your body, or you could just say your white blood cells, because that's really what lymphatic fluid is B cells, T cells, macrophages flowing to different parts of your body. You want to have good lymphatic flow and lymphatic circulation. A great way is breathing. A wonderful way, there's a system of movement called Hatha Yoga. And although some of it was aligned with a spiritual belief, other parts of it are just physical movement. Hatha Yoga is physical movement. And people combine all sorts of things, but we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater if it's not your spiritual belief. Yoga postures are all designed to compress glands and organs in our body. Even the shoulder stand, when you're upside down, you have to put your neck like this, is designed to compress the thyroid and the parathyroid gland. But it's a great way to move the lymphatic fluid, and I had patients have terrific response to healing their lymphatic problems very quickly, spending time every day doing yoga postures. You could just call it a different name if you don't like the name yoga. It doesn't matter. You could just call it lying upside down on your head exercise. These type of exercises have been all over the world in different forms of martial arts and yoga or whatever. Don't get too attached to the name of it. Just, try the movements. Qi Gong, whatever it's called. Tai Chi, yoga, Hatha yoga, Iyengar yoga. It doesn't matter. Move. Move moves the lymph. Lymphatic massage, which is a very light massage, because your lymph flows through the surface of your body. In fact, if you get bit by a rattlesnake, which the venom will move through your lymph, in the cowboy movies, I know they put the handkerchief around and tighten it down, but that's a blood constriction. All you have to do is dent the skin. That stops the lymph flow. So if all you have to do is dent the skin, and that stops the lymph flow, and we know that breast cancer that's killing women all over America is caused by constricted lymph, what could be the number one causing killer of that? Yeah, bras, thank you very much. So loosen them up.
Take them off.
Yeah, let's get back to the 60s. Right now, burn them, baby! Even if that's not true, I prefer it, so I just thought I'd mention that. It's hard as a doctor sometimes to draw that razor line. But I had the chance one time of visiting a lymphatic institute. And they were a medical institute that did all their study into the lymph system. And they killed a lot of people. It was really wonderful. They injected people's lymphatic fluid with radioactive dye and then had them stand in front of a fluoroscope or a constant X-ray to see how their lymph moved, doing different things. And the number one movement, because I saw the films, the number one movement that created the major lymphatic flow was deep breathing. Yeah, just deep breathing. Because when you take and expand your rib cage, you take all the pressure off your diaphragm and your lymphatic ducts, and everything just kind of goes. Bleh. That's the kind of sound it makes, but you don't hear it. And it moves, and it flows. So if you want the number one way to move your immune system, breathe. And most of us are surface breathers. We don't exercise enough. We don't march enough. Dr. Jensen used to take this march every morning and go, oh. It looked very strange. He said he learned it from a Chicago policeman. I don't know. But he was deep breathing and moving his lymph. So we have to move the lymph. Some people have bouncers and trampolines. I got one. Other people argue, no, it's better to have that back bend. I got one of those too. Get them all. Get them all. Get the toys. Don't be cheap with yourself when it comes to buying your toys for your health. All the juicers, get them all, play with them. But should I get buy the Vitamix too? I love my Vitamix. Yeah, I love my Vitamix, I love my juicer. In my office, we can hardly get in and out of my office because there's all these toys all over, and I'm either like, yeah, Sally, you're bothering me. I'm on my trampoline, or I'm on my, oh, this is breaking my back thing, whatever it is. It's just toys. Okay, emotional. There are a lot of things we do emotionally, and when we cover emotional, then we're going to come into the herbs early this afternoon, specific herbs for immunity, and some stories that you've never heard about them. But let's talk about the emotions, because although we know that if you eat bad food, it hurts your immune system, because there's a lot of things for your macrophages to eat up, and a lot of things for your B cells to use up their precious immunoglobulin, and you're depleting yourself and not nutritionally building your immune system up while you're forcing it to work more. So you don't want to do that. So we know that good food, and I don't need to go over that. We know that you have to move your body. We know that you have to have a clean elimination, otherwise your immune system's going to have a full-time job just protecting you from your constipation and not be able to fight off an invader that just came in your ear or your mouth or through a cut on your skin. Does that make sense? So our lifestyle taxes it. But the big area that I noticed with my patients, and that's what I'm here to do, is reflect to you what my patients taught me. Because really, 2% of what I know came out of the books and the schooling. And 98 came from my patients. But what I learned from my patients was the power of their mind and the maintenance of their immunity, and we'll discuss that for a moment. I read an article that was very enlightening to me in one of these fashion magazines that polled 1,000 women. And they asked these women how they felt about the size and shape of their breast and the placement of their nipple. And 100% of them, all 1,000, were unhappy with the size and shape of their breast and the placement of their nipple. And do we wonder why breast cancer is killing women all over America? You cannot, on a daily basis, have a negative affirmation about a part of your body and then expect it to be well. I love my shiny head. Man, I really dig it. I love everything about me. I'm so obnoxious around our house. I am so cool, so groovy. I love my life. We sit outside, me and my son and Anisha, and we do this mantra game of what we love. Oh, we love our house. Oh, we love the jacuzzi. Oh, we love our ice. Oh, we love our refrigerator. We love our, we just go on about what we love. Positive affirmations instead of complaining. We love. Often, so many people, I see them look in the mirror. I used to live with an ex-model. She was a very successful model. I won't mention her name on stage. And she used to stand in front of the mirror for an hour every morning going like this, checking her legs, checking the breast. But she always had a frown on her face. Because I stand in front of the mirror and I'm like, and I'm going, yeah, dude! Man, you are blessed. And I feel really good after I do that. I'm so excited and so passionate about myself, about all of you, about life. But she used to sit there and check for cellulite bumps and as the breast sagging. And sometimes I'd grab her and I'd say, I love you. And she'd go, ooh, this is very delicate tissue right here when they photograph close. I mean, I almost had to put her in a plastic bag with bubble wrap. And it only took me 10 years to get out of that one. I had a lot to learn. But on the surface of many immune cells, T cells, B cells, even macrophages, there's a lot of different receptors so they can talk to each other. Science a decade ago found a receptor on most all the immune cells for neuropeptides. The interesting thing is neuropeptides are brain chemicals. I can spell that, B-R-A-I-N. Are brain chemicals. It's a very interesting new part of psychiatry and science because it's theorized that every time we have an emotion that we are creating certain brain chemicals. So if you're happy and blissed out like I am, you're creating chemistry that's going through your body. If you get a little bumped and you're a little angry, you're creating a certain chemistry. You know how it feels like when you're blissed out and you're in love? You have those moments that we try to stretch out where you're just going, oh, this is wonderful. Everything's falling into place. And what it feels like physically, wonderful, blissful. And then you know what it feels like when someone's in front of you and you're in a traffic jam and you wish you had the laser buttons on your steering wheel and you're angry. And what about when you really want to kill someone? When you really hate? You know what that feels like inside your body, like that acid going through? Well, science is calling that neuropeptides. And they're calling it opening and shutting windows with chemistry. So science is hoping, and psychiatry is hoping, that we'll be able to identify all the neuropeptides for happy, sad, love, bliss, and be able to make that in pill form. So if you need more happy, you can take the happy pill. And really, that's where the drug ecstasy came from. Drug ecstasy that's used as a street drug, and people take it and they're very loving and hugging and blissful and like sex and all of that. Ecstasy just came from a pharmaceutical drug that was designed to open those windows. It's found that LSD opens certain windows that sometimes don't open with people, that give you extra sensory perception. In other words, your senses are more perceptive. So we create chemicals called neuropeptides that are picked up by the brain. A few years later, science deduced that the immune cells were listening to our emotional dialogue. Because we're creating neuropeptides and there are receptors here, and you don't have, receptors are ears. They're listening to our emotional dialogue. And then immediately after that, they discovered that your immune cells were not only listening to your emotional dialogue, but reacting to your emotional dialogue. And now it is known, there's a personality type in psychiatry instead of a person type A or person type B, called a person type C, which is a cancer type. And they're saying that that type of person, the way their mind is working, creates cancer in the body. And they now know that there are certain thoughts that you can have that will actually tell the T cells to go eat the cancer. There are also certain thoughts that you can have that will tell your T cells to go to sleep, and certain thoughts that you can have and feelings that you can have that make your whole immune system shut down. Why did we ever think that we could separate our mind and emotions and spirit from our immune system, or for that matter, any other system of the body from any other system? You are what you eat, but you are also what you think. And tomorrow is what you think and believe and do today. Yeah, I'm going to clap, we'll edit it out. So what did I see in my patients that were sick? A lot of people that didn't like themselves or their life. One thing I realized in the clinic was there's no such thing as just a physiological disease. There's no such thing as just an emotional disease. And I know that because remember my patient that had chronic depression? We cleaned out his bowel and he got well. Everybody was attacking it on an emotional level. He was just filled with those long 5-foot snakes. And when he got those snakes out, he could think better. You cannot separate the mind from the body. In fact, it probably will be discovered in a few years how much more all the things you think affect the way your body works. But what I saw in my clinic was a lot of low self-esteem, a lot of lack of self-worth, a lot of depression, and a lot of stress. And if I could cure that with my patients by my obnoxious, passionate, life-loving behavior, maybe they got better because I was a better salesperson than a doctor. I don't care. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I saw a movie about Africa that was great with one of my favorite actors, Morgan Freeman, and someone was saying to him, but suppose I give people false hope. And he said, false hope's better than no hope at all. Boy, I'll tell you, I'll take hope any way, shape, or form I can get it. Let me tell you a story. It's an immune story. Kind of. I was teaching back east. When I arrived, there were 600 student and staff members, and they came to meet me at the airport, and they said, we have a real problem. We're having a poison ivy epidemic. And everybody's got poison ivy. They said, please come and help us. So when I got to the school, I saw so many patients the first day, I couldn't find any poison ivy. I found a lot of freak out about poison ivy, but mostly mosquito bites and heat rash, and often nothing. except what we could call psychosomatic poison ivy, and a few cases of poison ivy. And I thought, what is the best way to handle this? So I went out and I started tincturing jewelweed. And jewelweed is a plant that stops dermatitis that grows all over where the poison ivy is. Wherever you have a plant in nature that might bother you in one way, Dr. Christopher always said that without moving both feet, the antidote was right within sight. And it's really true. Nature's very balanced. But in the middle of making all this jewelweed, I realized this really isn't the answer for this panic. So I stopped the jewelweed, and the next day I got up in the auditorium and addressed all 600 student and staff. And I said, and I recognize that some of you have poison ivy, and everybody was sitting there itching like this. And I said, it's really an absolute blessing because nature creates a lot of plants to stimulate us in various ways in the springtime and even in the fall to stimulate our immune system. And you know that when you get a dermatitis, you have an immune reaction. That could be called an immune stimulation. And when you scratch and itch it, you stimulate your immune system. And this is just nature's way of keeping us all strong so we can endure life with a strong immune system. They all applauded and they clapped, and I was just making it up. I don't know that. But here's what I do know. There is no healing potential to making yourself sick and freak out and being depressed and loaded with anxiety. But just by believing in something positive, I know I'm stimulating this immune system. Okay, so I immediately stimulated all their immune systems without any herbs or drugs or anything, just by telling them a story. But you know what? I believe that. I believe that there's nothing in nature to hurt us that's bad or from the devil. It's all our blessing and used in different ways. But I did it specifically to get them loving it. I want to tell you, by that afternoon, I saw over 50 students crawling outside, crawling through the garden and the weeds, trying to get poison ivy. That's the point, okay? Let's turn it all into something that's a blessing. You heard my in the closet speech yesterday. It's all a blessing. Oops, does water all over the microphone hurt it? Only kidding, only kidding. Okay, so how did I put this into play in my clinic? In a number of ways. One of the things I saw early on in my clinic were a lot of my patients were stressed out by the accumulation of work and stuff in their life. And one thing that I noticed is that most of my very sick patients had a box of bills and papers and things that they couldn't deal with, but they kept it in a big box. And one of the things that helped my patients was taking that box in a big breath and walking outside and throwing it in the trash can. I know it appears at the time that you cannot live without it, but let me tell you, your disease cannot live without it. You need to get rid of those boxes of papers. From there, we would go into the garage. And I know you're planning on having a garage sale sometime in 2143. But the reality is that you're going to drop dead and leave all that garbage that killed you to your children. They're going to look at it and then have to debate, oh my God, I think this is an absolute piece of crap, but it was Uncle Harry's favorite screwdriver. Then they're going to get sick and die too. So go out into the garage and get rid of it all now. You'll save yourself and your kids a lot of disease and grief. I'll give you a few specific stories. I walked into a woman's house. I did a house call, one of the few doctors that did them, and she was bedridden with asthma, blue in color, enlarged muscles under the diaphragm by trying to suck air through a hole the size of a toothpick, and very, very ill. When I went in the house, she only got up once, and it was to scream at the maids, because you know, most of you know that my patients were the rich and famous in the Hollywood and the movie industry and the music industry. She was screaming at the maids, choking, and I could barely hear what she said. And I said, "What are you saying?" She goes, "I must live in a dust-free environment." And there was dust on the door, and so the cleaning crew came in and they were dusting it off the door. And I looked around her house, and I saw an amazing museum of weirdness. And the first thing I saw, because I was in her bedroom, there was a little crystal bowl on her dresser, and I said, "What is in this?" And I opened it up, and she goes, "That's hair from my dog." And I thought, "Oh, that's real interesting." And she said, "It died 17 years ago." Oh, I see. That makes sense to me. And in the living room was a Christmas tree from about 7 Christmases ago. But I think she had had a divorce or something, so the house kind of froze at that point. And there was still tinsel on it. That was the only thing that looked good, because, you know, plastic will way outlive us, and certainly a tree. And as I walked through the house, it was a museum to death and ill health. And I said, "I can fix you. I can teach you to fix yourself. But you're going to have to give me carte blanche here. I'm going to have to be able to do anything I want." And she said, "I will do anything to live." Because doctors told her she was going to die. She had the big 3, asthma, emphysema, and bronchitis. All of them. She couldn't breathe. It was like to get a breath. I said, "Fine." I went home. Next morning, set my alarm clock, 6 o'clock, got up, put on my best karate gi, my black belt, and I borrowed a machete from the gardener and put it in my side here. I walked into her house sharply at 7 a.m. and I said, "Let's go." And she was in a wheelchair in the living room. I first took that Christmas tree. Man, I had my eyes on that baby. And I whacked it, and as I did that, she was going, I saw her jerk, and I thought, we're moving some energy. Shot that sucker up, and I started a fire in the fireplace. Started a fire in the fireplace and burning that Christmas tree, the bulbs, everything. Let's burn it down. This is just going to be one big recycling facility. I got rid of, oh, you name it. I saw that color TV, man, that was my favorite. I picked that sucker up, and I started a pile out in her driveway. Color TV, stereo, all sorts of things. By the end of the day, she was calling people on the phone saying, "Please come over. There's a madman in my house. And if you ever wanted anything of mine, it's in the driveway." But she was going with it. And we moved it out. I mean, I came up with a crystal bowl, and she said, "Not that." And I took the hair and threw it in the burning fireplace where it just fizzled. I can remember all the exact details. And she was there, doing her thing. When I got done, there was nothing left in her house but her bed and one carpet. I had emptied the entire house, and this wasn't an easy house. We're talking a Hollywood Hills Rich and Famous, and I was into it, man. I loved it. Took a few things to make myself sick, threw them in the back of my car. And she was so freaked out about the situation that she left town for a week. And when she was out of town, her house was robbed, and they took the bed and the carpet. Which really, I laughed just like you, but it really proved to me that I was too lightweight with her. I should have trashed the joint, maybe even torched the place, okay? The long and short of it is that was the biggest breakthrough in her healing that no doctor would do. And within 2 years, she was in the Olympic trials. Okay, this person became one of the top athletes in the country. So, and you know what? In the Olympic trials, have you ever been there? It is so dirty. Horses and horsehair and dirt and sand all over the place. And all her equipment and her clothes were covered with dust. And I said, what happened to this dust-free environment? It wasn't a dust-free environment. It was milk. It was beef. It was the food she was eating. It was her constipation. Let's not blame dust for everything, okay? It was her lifestyle, and when we changed it, but the power was in the trashing. So I started using that name, trashing, and used that for a lot of my severely ill patients. I had another woman with a severe breast cancer. She had been to all the doctors, no help. They said she might die. She had been to the natural healers, no help. I did a house call when I got there, and I was taking a tour of her house, because you never know what you're going to find. But all of a sudden, it's like, whoop, 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 you know what it is. And we passed a door on the way to her bedroom, and I said, "Oh, well, what's in there?" And she goes, "No, And I was like, whoa, it must be something good. And she goes, don't go in there. And I watched, and one of her hands was actually holding her breast when she said, don't go in there. Because you have to be a good detective and just watch the moving and the breathing and the eyes. And I said, what is in there? I have to go in there. I'm not going to work with you unless I can go in that room now. And as she was saying no, I was undoing the door and opening it. And I went in, and oh my God, here it was, the child's death room. And I didn't know it, but she had had a baby. And when it was, I think, 4 or 5, it had died. And this was about 15 years ago. And she froze the room at that point. It was now one of those rooms you saw out of a Vincent Price, The Horrors of the Haunted House. One of those rooms. Sheets over things, cobwebs, toys that were frozen in the place they were. And I said, Mom, this place has got to go. And I said, it's got to go now. And I started picking up stuff. She was crying. I dragged some of it out to the dumpster. In California, we have these great dumpsters. Man, they're great. Took it out to the dumpster, threw it away. Threw all the stuff in her dumpster. And then at one point I grabbed something and she like screamed, and I said, here, you throw it away. I'm not going to do all your dirty work and your cleansing. Hey, it's your detoxification. And she was throwing it away, and when she threw something very precious away, she screamed, fell over on the dumpster, cried, and she said at that point she had the worst pain in her cancer of her breast that she had ever had since she had this disease. And I knew we were onto something. Sure, I put her on the programs, but she told me that that was the biggest moment in her life that she felt in her guts that cured herself of her cancer. I had a quick one. I was at the same school back east, and they asked me if I would please visit the staff member. She was only 25. She had the worst colitis, and nothing would help. And I went in her room, and she had been bleeding from the bowels and vomiting, and she was doubled over in pain, crying in her bed. I just started talking with her, and as I was talking with her, I was asking her a few questions, and asking her a little bit about this and a little bit about that, and I said, well, why are you working here? And you look very young, and this and that. And up on the wall in a prominent place in her room was a big diploma. And she had graduated top of her class, magna cum laude, all of it. And I said, oh, wow, you must be really smart. And she said, oh, and she grabbed her gut. She goes, I hated college. She goes, I never wanted to go, but my parents have this wonderful torture of, I'll give you money only if you do torture yourself and do something you don't want to do. I know you want to be an artist, but an artist, fartist, go to Paris, France, or become an accountant, because I'm only going to pay your bills if you become an accountant. You know that one, and some of you are guilty of it because I saw you go like this. Hey, it's from today onward. Remember, today onward. And so she had been tortured by that parental game, and she hated it. And I said, can I see this? And she said, yeah. And I took it down off the wall. She said, hey, be careful. And I looked at it, and it was all this stuff, but I saw her hurting, and it was like the focal point in her room. So I slipped it out of the glass, and I went, and I watched her, and she went, oh! Like that, vomit coming out, and then I went, oh! I watched the scenario as it was happening. In 2 days, she never had colitis again. I had destroyed what to her represented 6 years of hell in her very short life. Okay, now sure, we got her on the food programs, and it's not always that easy as ripping up a diploma. But when I got home after that trip, I walked in my office and I sat down with a patient, and they wouldn't look at me. They were looking up at my diplomas. They were looking up at 17 certificates that I had on the wall from all the various naturopathic schools, and 3 from Dr. Jensen and Dr. Christopher, and all the studying that I had done. And I was saying, hey, I'm over here. And then at one point, they quoted to me Dr. Schultz. And I said, I'm Dr. Schultz! Don't quote me to me. I probably changed my mind. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it really, really made me mad. And I said, can you excuse me for a minute? And she said, yes. And I said, just go out and sit in the waiting room. And I had nice waiting rooms with essential oils and couches. I sat her down, and I came back in. and I took my first most favorite diploma off the wall, and I put my fist through it to cut all the skin off my knuckles from the shearing glass. But it was a great moment. You had to be there. And then I proceeded to take them all down. Then I remember taking my stethoscope and putting one foot on it and stretching it so far I could snap and break the rubber tubes. And then I started ripping up my sphygmomanometer. Anybody that has a sphygmomanometer in their office has a sphincter problem, okay? Let me tell you. And I cut that sucker up and ripped it up, went through my diplomas, and then I realized I was almost ready to go back out and get her, although the room was a bit trashed. And I looked in my bookcase, and I had 3,000 books on natural healing. And do you know that every one of them was a lie? And the only reason I had them there was to impress my patients so they'd think I knew something. And I knew something, that everything in that book was a lie. So I went downstairs, I snuck by her, and wheeled my dumpster out to the window. And I took 3,000 books and carted them over and threw them out the second story. Most of them landed in the garage and the driveway, but I threw them in this dumpster. I decided that I did not like my desk. And I took a hammer and smashed it up and threw it out the window. After about 4 hours, in this fit of sweat and insanity, all I had left in my office was a lamp sitting on the floor. And I went back out. I tried to gain my composure because I realized I was playing the same game. I needed to be a self-cleaning oven here. I went out and she was still in the waiting room. And I was like, I probably should have told you 3.5 hours ago to go home and we'll do this another day. And she goes, well, do you still have time? And I thought, sure, come on in. And when I opened the door and all there was a lamp on the floor, it was one of the stranger moments in my life. Yeah. Just be aware that what is going on up here is talking to every cell in your body. You cannot be healthy and not love yourself. If you don't know how, and most of us haven't had much practice, that's okay. Just start by some attempt. You can write positive affirmations. Most of us are running affirmations all day long about what we don't like about ourselves. What we don't like, what doesn't look good, the people we don't like. Just start writing a few of those down, and when you got one that you don't like, you can turn it around into one that you do like. Make a positive one from it. I had a patient with AIDS that was so ill, she only had 2 T cells. 2. Now they say AIDS is anything below 1,500 or 1,000 T cells. She had 2. The next time they tested her, she had 1. And when I listened to her, everything she said was a nightmare. I said, if you can't develop some type of positive affirmation, you're going to make yourself sick. So let's develop positive affirmations right now. You love yourself. And I forced her to say some things over the phone, and it wasn't working. So I said, look, I'll call you back tomorrow, and I know you'll have a positive affirmation, and I'll have some jokes for you, and you tell it to me. And when I called her up in the morning, she said, I have one, Dr. Schultz. And I said, what's that? And she goes, the cancer isn't going to spread throughout my whole body and eat me alive? Not very good for the best you can do. And sadly enough, she died a few weeks after that. Your body can't survive on food alone. It needs emotional food. It needs that self-love. And if you want to know more about it, talk to Anisha, because she'll tell you about my obnoxious behavior to the ultimate degree around our house about how cool I am. And how much I love myself. But why not go over the top with self-love and self-worth? Why not? Is it just okay to go over the top with hating yourself or rage or anger? Is it just okay to go over the top with jealousy or possessiveness or judgmentalism? Why not go over the top with looking in the mirror and how loud you can scream and how much you love yourself? I mean, this is, again, remember the essence of my clinic, going over the top with the good things, far beyond. My echinacea bottle used to say, take 2 dropperfuls 5 times a day and then say, I love you 30 times in the mirror. Used to say that on the bottle for my patients. I wasn't kidding. My patients needed a lot of practice in this. And look at the things around you. I love this watch. Okay, I know it's a material possession, and maybe tomorrow I'll hate it and hit it with a hammer. I mean, I don't know. But, you know, you love yourself, love your stuff. If you don't, you know, a friend of mine says love the cup that you drink out of and the bowl. And, you know, you ever notice that you have a lot of stuff in your house that you like, but you have a lot of stuff that you don't like? Get rid of the stuff you don't like. The clothes that don't fit, the clothes that you don't like, the ones that are worn out. Most of the time we just stare at it and go, well, those are the ones I don't like. I mean, you have so many cups in your house, but you always grab the same one. Maybe get 10 of those. You know, whatever turns you on. You got to work on it. It's part of health. Let me talk about, I was so in love with my watch, I didn't even look what time it was. I was just admiring this thing. Yeah, it's old. It's an old watch. It's still working. See? Now here's a watch. This is a watch from the 1880s, and I really like it because it has a green dial. See, I'm sharing my toys now and all the things that turn me on. But it has a green dial. But this is still working perfectly and keeps perfect time. But all my grandparents and parents are dead. Now, does that make sense that we can make something that lasts much longer than us? I mean, come on, this is just metal parts. It can't grow a new wheel or a spring if it breaks down, and we can. So, anyway, I could spend an hour on my watch. The dangers of organ transplantation. It's a good time. I'm going to look right in the camera. I'm talking to you. You better switch over to this one right now. This is the Dr. Schultz look. The dangers of organ transplantation. The number one danger. I had thousands of patients and people that were on organ transplant lists, and none of them got organ transplants. The first miracle healing testimony on this tape is a man whose wife was on the organ transplant list, Jim Rhineflesh from Pocatello, Idaho. And she was off it with a lot of detailed natural healing. A liver flush for 3 days. That was the start. I had a lot of patients on organs transplants list. There's only one problem, and now you'll understand this better with more basic knowledge of immunology. But when you have a transplanted organ, whose is it? Somebody else's. So the one thing we know is it's not you. Your immune system will kill anything that's not you. So the only way you can be transplanted and survive is if medicine also shuts off your immune system with immune suppressive drugs. Now somehow to me, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. In this day and age of cancer and AIDS and viral attacks and flesh-eating bacteria and Legionnaire's disease hiding up there, and then they open that darn thing and now I'm being sprinkled with this stuff? Do we want to shut off our immune system? To me, that's the biggest problem with transplantation. Now, I have 1,000 other reasons. I always never put that donor card on my license because I'm afraid they'll come to my house before I'm dead. I have this fear that, you know, I don't know if you saw the Monty Python where they throw you right on the table and you go, but I'm not dead. And they go, it says right here, you give your liver. I have that fear, so. Thanks, Tim. I just want to assure you here that one, organ transplantation is not an answer because you'll be on immune suppressive drugs, and maybe your organ that's transplanted will work, but you will succumb or die or get ill from something else. I also want to assure you that every patient I had that was on an organ transplant list rebuilt their organ. I don't care if it was a liver, I don't care if it was a kidney, I don't care if it was a heart. Any organ, you can rebuild it. You just stop doing the things that make you sick and begin doing the things that will make you well. I still don't know what time it is. God, what a great watch. Okay. Let's talk about, let me tell you a story. In the 1880s, when my watch was made, there was a man living in Pawnee City, Nebraska, who was a kind of a salesman of a sort. And he learned early on that when people were sick, the native Plains Indians dug up a plant and used it for all types of ailments. You name it. You name the ailment, they used it for it. And so he manufactured alcoholic extracts of it, which we now call a tincture, into bottles and sold it all over the West. He was such a fanatic, probably like me, that he brought rattlesnakes with him on the road. And when he had a big audience, he would let a venomous rattlesnake bite him and show that his tonic protected him from that. And that's where the term was coined, a snake oil salesman, which meant a fraud or a charlatan or whatever. And he sold Myers blood purifying tonic, Myers blood purifying tonic, all over the Wild West. And I actually have seen the label on it, and it says it's for nausea, hydrophobia, mad dog bites, gunshot wounds, snake bites, spider bites, syphilis, bad relatives. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. And it was said that he was always drunk because he drank copious amounts of it, and it was alcohol-based. One day he decided to send it to the greatest professor at that time, Professor King. Professor King wrote The American Dispensatory of Herbs. And at that time, herbal medicine was the medicine that was being used. And he was the greatest knowledge of herbs. In fact, if you find that book, I think it's been reprinted, and you can find it in old libraries and medical schools sometimes, and even in bookstores. It's called King's American Dispensatory. It's really the herb book of America of the late 1800s. Well, he sent a case of his blood purifier to Professor King, and Professor King opened it up, and it was a case of blood purifier. And he wrote him back a letter something like, "You idiot, I can't identify a plant from a liquid juice that you make up and sell off a wagon." And he took that case of blood purifier and put it under the workbench. Prior to that year, his wife, Mrs. King, had developed cancer. And it was growing in her body, and she was dying. And Professor King was friends with the Lloyd brothers, John and Uri Lloyd, who had the biggest herbal pharmacy in America in Cincinnati, Ohio, at the turn of the century. And they're considered to have made the best herbal preparations around at the time. And Professor King had his wife on all their herbal preparations, was friends with them, knew more about medicine and plants than anybody, and his wife was getting sicker and sicker. One day, she started looking better, and within a month, she had actually healed herself of cancer. And when Professor King and the Lloyd brothers sat down with her and said what happened, they wanted to know which one of their medications she was taking so they knew what the cure for cancer was. She said, "I stopped taking all your medications and I started drinking that tonic I found under the workbench because it said it would heal cancer." And she had drained all the bottles and healed her cancer. Professor King immediately sent a dispatch out to Joseph Myers and his snake oil and said, "Dig up the plant and send it to me so we can identify it." And when he received the plant, they identified it of a couple different names, but it's now called Echinacea. And it's Echinacea angustifolia primarily. At that point, the Lloyd brothers started making Echinacea angustifolia tonic in their pharmacy, and within 2 years it became the #1 prescribed herbal medicine in America for bad relatives, mad dog bites, snake bites. Like my dad used to say, it's good for what ails you. It became so big. But as it was becoming big, the crushing influences of the power families and the pharmaceutical industries were killing off herbology and natural medicine in America. There were 50,000 practicing eclectic and herbal doctors in America in the 1910s and 1920s, and within a decade they were all gone. After a while, you get tired of getting beat up and incarcerated. And herbal medicine was put out of business, and echinacea got lost in the shuffle, unfortunately, for many, many years. If it wasn't for great people like Randolph Stone and John Christopher and Pavel Arola and Bernard Jensen and Henry Lindlar and the great healers of this century, we might not even know about this stuff. But they carried it along and kept using it. Echinacea does a number of things in your body. After ingestion, it stimulates and increases macrophage production and increases the activity, like a fever. Echinacea stimulates and increases macrophage production and activity. More macrophages, faster, more gobbling activity. Echinacea increases the number of your T cells dramatically. I've had patients with 100 T cells that went up to 1,000 in 2 weeks, and all they really did was echinacea. Echinacea can take your T cell count and raise it up dramatically. So in any disease where you're running out of immune cells, echinacea should definitely be there. Echinacea increases your body's production of interferon and interleukin. Remember, the chemicals that the macrophages excrete to create that fever or to communicate better or to get faster reinforcements against what's hurting you. And echinacea also increases the amount of immunoglobulin. I'll stand back here. Echinacea also increases the amount of immunoglobulin that you have available for your B cells to develop antibodies. In fact, in my study, I have found no response of the immune system that isn't stimulated or increased or both by the usage of echinacea.
Good morning. Good morning. Don't worry, you can't see me. Just relax, breathe, and take a listen to my story, okay? My mom couldn't get pregnant. She tried for 15 years after she met my dad. So eventually, in the early 1950s, in desperation, she took some dangerous fertility drugs. And finally, she got pregnant, and my brother was born. It was a very difficult birth. She had a C-section, and because of this, he has some physical problems because of the drugs, and that's his wonderful blessing. So the doctors told her never again. They said to my mom, never again, no more pregnancies, and it would kill you. So they tied her fallopian tubes, and then an incredible miracle happened. Me. My spirit prevailed. God wanted me to be here. Then I was given a very wonderful blessing when I was young. My mom and dad both died. They got out of the way. Maybe not to dampen my imagination, maybe not to destroy my spirit, maybe not to cloud my genius, because we're all born geniuses. It's just some of us get less damage as we grow up than others. And I'm undamaged goods. After my mom's death, I was given the blessing of the lawyers selling the house. And I had to run away to avoid a foster home. And I quit school at the age of 14. Yes! They said I needed public education. Dun, 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 dun. We don't need no education. Dun, 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 dun. We don't need no thought control. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, teacher, leave us kids alone. All they wanted was another brick in the wall. And I was given the blessing of not being another brick in the wall. The system didn't get a chance to poison my mind, numb my inner voice, and kill God's voice within me. At the age of 16, I was given the incredible blessing of inheriting a severely deformed heart that got worse weekly. The blessing of almost dying. I was given another blessing of growing up in the fabulous 50s, the wonder drug era of antibiotics and polio vaccines in a very modern city where Kodak and Xerox and IBM was. I was given the blessing of being near the best research hospitals and medical universities in the world. I was given the blessing of having the best and finest medical doctors for my heart that would systematically show me their incredible stupidity, their ignorance, their lies, their untrusting, godless, weak-minded, disbelieving, unloving, pitiful attempt to try and heal people with their egos, without God, without nature, and instead of healing, I watched them butcher people. But I was given the blessing of meeting another young man in the hospital who was very sick like me. We became best friends, and his name was Bob. And I was given the blessing of watching the medical doctors kill him. My whole life has been a divine blessing, a divine setup. I've been set up for what I'm doing now. So listen to my words. You can write them down if you want. You can repeat them to others. You can memorize them. But above all, experience. Experience what I tell you by experiencing life as you feel. What's in your guts. Not how you're supposed to act, but how you feel to act. Living life as your higher self. Can you hear what you think anymore? God, I hope so. Can you get what's inside out? Get inside out. Because everything in your life has been your blessing too. You've been given exactly what you need to be here now. Inside of me is the voice of God. I am a divine channel of God's message on healing. Not perfection, not me, but I am a clear channel of the message of God's natural healing plan. I'm a channel of God, but here's the best part. So are you. I will help you be what you have been born for, trained for, molded for your entire life. I know you know that this is true, and that's why you trekked hundreds, if not thousands of miles to come here and see me. It's not just to learn about another herb or an enema. It's to expand your horizons, unleash your inner self, and let God's natural healing program move through you to discover the unknown possibilities of your existence. That's why you're here, and I thank you for coming.
I see some terrified and worried looks on your faces. You just spent your last dime, travel all the way to California to be in the room with a madman. We might have to do that again in a few minutes. Good morning. Good morning.